Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. It is Tuesday, January 17th, as we sit down to record this smorgasbord episode. We're going to kind of do a bunch of different stuff, Keith. A catch-up episode of sorts.
There's like little bits of news flying around and not any major news per se. And we're just on the precipice of college season hype time. So get yourself prepared. We want to make sure that you are fully locked in and braced for college preseason. So that episode's coming. And in the meantime, we've got some odds and ends to kind of pick up around here.
If you can believe it, Keith, we are just over a week and a half from Santa Barbara Invite. We've also got the women's division of Carolina kickoff coming up this weekend. And then we really get rocking and rolling here in the college season. So lots to come next week. We'll take a look at some team lists for some tournaments coming up as well.
I mentioned last week when you were like, oh, the college season, that we were like looking up to see if the college season officially started. And you were like, it started January 1st. And I was like, why? Why should we do that? And it's like, then we went on this whole tangent about like somebody should have an event, like a sanctioned game, happen literally the first moment that you can play Sanctioned Ultimate. It's like a tradition. And somebody said that it should be, somebody in our Discord said that it would be appropriate for Rutgers and Princeton to do that. So Rutgers and Princeton, if you're out there listening, let's make this a tradition. First, at least the first day of the season, sanctioned scrimmage. It could be a game of 3 and then you all can have a party. I don't care. It could be at midnight for all I care. But
if I'm in town, I'll go. Fun. I'll go. I'll report on the game, kickoff of the college season.
You can call it the college season kickoff. Yep.
You know, I don't think either of those teams, because you worry about teams being like, oh, I don't want to play a game yet. Like, I don't want to screw up my bid chances. Rutgers and Princeton don't need to worry about their bid chances.
I'm telling you, plus for a little while, you will get to say we are the number 1 or number 2 team in the country. Like for a little while,
you get that.
Nobody else can take it from you.
Undefeated.
Somebody's undefeated.
So first, before we get into catching up on some Western Ultimate League news, some AUDL news, some PUL news, we're going to catch up on some responses to our show from last week. We got a couple of bold predictions coming through and some other notes as well. So first and foremost, recall that in a bold prediction show, I picked the Philly Surge to win the PUL in 2023. And there was a response over on Twitter. Keith, maybe you should break this one down for us.
Yeah, I think really that somebody took issue with the idea that Philly had not really had like a big coalescing around the women's division in a while. And I get the idea behind it. You've seen that AMP has had a lot of the top players. And Jeff George on Twitter, who I believe is a former coach with Philadelphia Green /Green Means Go /GMG, however you want to, whatever the name you want to go with is, it changed over time, with a list of top players who have played with that program. So whether it was Amel Wada-Kareem or Katie Ryan or a number of players who ended up eventually like playing with AMP where they made their name, like Danny Byers, Kelsey Devlin, Linda Morse. These are strong players who played with the program, and they did have a couple of years making it to nationals. I will grant you that. But Anna Thompson was on the list. So, Charlie, did you have a response or thoughts to share in response to this? I mean, it tagged you individually.
I was added.
You were added.
I appreciate the non-subtweeting that's happening here. And Jeff said, quote, a handful of these players did go on to play AMP, yes, and the women's program has been on a tough road for a little while. I'll give you that. But there were some glory years not too long ago. That said, I'm excited for Philly Surge to kick butt. Hashtag Philly, hashtag history, hashtag facts. Always good to have the hashtag facts at the end of your tweet. Look, listen, I know Green Means Go made nationals, but I stand by what I said. I really don't think we've ever seen the top, because if you think about the players that went through that program, they were typically doing it as they were coming up in the sport, right? This was a team that was their trampoline towards elite ultimate. And then they went on typically to play on AMP or something else like along those lines. Green Means Go, solid team. Typically did not do that much at the national championships. I'm not trying to hate. I'm just trying to be honest. I'm trying to give you hashtag facts. So I think Jeff and I would agree that there's lots of really good talent in Philly and that a women's team with all of that top talent would be very good. And I think we're going to get a chance to see that this year in the PUL. And we haven't really had a chance to see that before because AMP has pulled top women for a long time. So that's my point.
I mostly agree with you. I mean, yeah, Green Means Go finished 15th out of 16 in both of those appearances at nationals. And a number of those players did go on to become bigger names after leaving the Philadelphia program. Definitely there's been talent in Philly. Katie Ryan and Nikki Ross are players who I recall watching play at a really high level with Philly women's programs. But I do think that this Philly Surge team, who we're going to talk a little bit about some of the roster announcements that they've made, I do think that this could be a more talented group at this point than Philly women's side has seen in quite a few years.
There were also some notes on your prediction, Keith, of having number 1 versus number 2 preseason teams meeting in the finals in 3 of the 4 divisions.
Yeah, look. I was catching some flack. Somebody came in with the
not bold enough.
With the Keith's prediction is that the 2 best teams will play in the finals. Look. I actually think my prediction might be too bold. That the preseason number 1 and number 2 in 3 of 4 divisions will meet in the final. I think that's probably one of the boldest predictions that we made in the entire episode. We looked back at the history. It's not even that common for it to happen in any division, let alone for 3 of the 4 divisions to have that happen. And as Sue smartly pointed out during the episode, it's as much I think we're going to be able to nail the predictions component at the beginning of the season as it is about how good the teams will be. But my general point is that I think that the teams everyone expects to be really good are going to be the best teams and probably by a long shot. But we've seen in many years, the 2 best teams don't make it to the final. The 2 top ranked teams don't make it to the final. I mean, the teams that are number 1 and number 2 in the preseason right now could end up as the 2 and 3 seed or the 1 and 4 seed at nationals, win all of their games at nationals convincingly, and then have to play each other in semifinals. Like that's an extremely plausible and not that uncommon outcome. So for 3 of 4 divisions, this is bold, and I'm not going to take it back.
He doth protest too much. Okay, and then how about this? This comes from the Ulti World Discord. This is straight off the rumor mill. This is Nate in the Ulti World Discord. Horrendous Rhino take. This is talking about Sue's call that they will not make quarters. Horrendous Rhino take from the rumors I'm hearing of Dylan Freechild, Xander Quizon-Tice, and Will Laurie joining the team this season. Keith, Dylan Freechild back to Rhino is like the club season storyline of my dreams. Like I think I wrote about this in a mailbag a few months ago as just like if I could write the script, this is what I would write. Of course, Freechild played with Rhino for years in the past, had some horrendous, brutal losses to Sockeye before eventually joining Sockeye, winning a title, winning Player of the Year. And could he be going back? I mean, this is straight rumor. I mean, there's no substance to this besides somebody saying it, but it wouldn't be that crazy.
Are there not enough Kevin Durant comparisons to that pathway you just laid out for Freechild? You can't beat him, join him kind of thing. At least in the Northwest.
I don't think you get to call it a Durant comparison when he's going back to a hometown team
the other
hasn't
way.
Won anything.
When he left
when he went to Sockeye.
to join Sockeye.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, okay. Yes, 100%.
I mean, if he doesn't do a parody of the decision to like make his return, like what are we doing here?
Dylan, call me. Yeah. We'll set it up. We'll do a live stream.
And bring it along some ego buddies too. I mean, like can we just start unearthing ego legends? Like can we just bring back the All-Star? Can Aaron Hahn emerge like the Undertaker and like this could be hype.
He just suddenly sits up like that. The Undertaker sits up out of the coffin. Aaron Hahn. Wow. You got to be a longtime listener to even know who that is.
His name pops up every once in a while. Someone will bring it up.
It's like, yeah,
usually
he's like
in
playing
concert
in
with
obscure
Will Driscoll.
summer league.
Yeah.
That would be something else. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And then we got a bold prediction, an anonymous bold prediction. This one's fun. Here we go. My bold prediction is a parlay. Always a good start to a bold prediction. The Washington Sun Dodgers will make the semifinals of college nationals, while the women's team Washington Element will miss nationals entirely.
Whoa.
The men's team will finally be able to get past quarters, but still lose in semis to one of the powerhouses like UNC, Colorado, or Pitt. But Element has sneakily lost a lot of talent. Steph Phillips, Nikki Chan, Ikran Elmi, and so many more. Abby Hecko is amazing, but this is an entirely new roster compared to the team that came in as the 5 seed at Nationals. Now that is a spicy prediction.
Woo, yeah, that is spicy. The Sun Dodgers making semis is not like it's like a little bold, but we've been tabbing this as a team with that kind of talent for years. They just always seem to muck it up at the end. And you know, bucking that has some boldness to it, but Element to miss nationals. That's bold. I mean, this has been a bracket quality team for years. One of the probably like in aggregate, one of the strongest programs in women's division history, with a returning player of the year on the. I mean, if you took Abby Hecko and Mae Browning and Sophia Palmer and just put them on like average roster X, like I think you get a nationals team. Like I think if you just threw them on an Ohio Valley roster or South Central roster, like I think they can make nationals with just those three and average players.
I cannot deny the boldness of this, but I question the level of predictive quality that this has. So thanks for the prediction there, and lots of fun stuff. So let's move on. Keith, do you want to talk semi-pro, or do you want to look at the Santa Barbara invite team list?
Let's talk a little college. We just did a little college in our bold predictions responses. So let's do a little college here to keep it running.
All right. So the qualifier on the men's side is Arizona State. They do the SBI qualifying tournament. The UCSD B team on the women's division got the qualify. They're deciding whether or not to accept their bid. If they don't take it, then UC Irvine will get there. So here we go. And of course, there's always some late drops and stuff, so this isn't necessarily set in stone. But as we stand today on January 17th, women's division, BYU, Cal Poly Slow, Cal, Carleton, Lewis and Clark, Northwestern, Stanford, UC Davis, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, UC San Diego, UC Santa Cruz, Utah, Victoria, and Wisconsin, as well as the qualifier. Keith, that's quite a lineup for this tournament. Carleton out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere for sure. I mean, just like nowhere, Minnesota, it feels like. But they're flying out and getting the travel in early. We usually see them make their debut at Queen City Tune-Up, which is also a pretty decent trek, but we're used to seeing them pop up in mid-February. I wonder if they're headed to Queen City as well. But look, I love seeing this team go out, teams travel, and I love seeing there going to be connectivity. North Central going to get a lot of West Coast connectivity with both Carleton and Wisconsin, who could be in for a solid year on their own. And good for Wisconsin, who often, I think, travels out for one of these West Coast tournaments early in the year to try and to get out of the cold. I'm sure probably sick of indoor practices and whatnot. So both North Central schools traveling out and should make for some excitement with some of the solid West Coast programs that are there too.
I mean, I think in some ways this feels like a little bit of an indictment of the quality of competition on the East Coast, that Carleton would choose to move away from a tournament they've been going to for a long time to play against essentially the West Coast teams. And, you know, you look at the rankings from last year, and there's a lot of West Coast teams up there. And not all of them are going to be at this tournament, of course. You know, we're not going to have Washington, for instance, but there's California teams alone. last year, California teams, UCSB was at 4, UCSD was at 8, Stanford at 10, Davis at 11, UCLA at 18, Cal at 22. So you're just going to get more quality games potentially than you are at Queen City, where, of course, you'll play UNC probably in the finals, but you don't want just one good game. And the weather is just much more likely to be nice in Santa Barbara, let's be honest.
Well, that to me feels like one of the biggest factors. And also it's just a scheduling thing. I'm not willing to just chalk this up to like pure competitive edge. A lot of times it can be like, okay, does this tournament fit our schedule? Does this travel fit our schedule? Maybe you just have a group of people that would prefer to try going to California. Maybe somebody on the team has family in California, so you have a free house to stay in or something. Like all those kinds of things play into the what tournament are we going to this year planning. And Carleton, I think, is going to be one of the more curious cases of the top level teams. Like, how good could they be this year? They lost a lot of key talent. They certainly have plenty back too, but not the most fun way to end their season last year. And now they lost Carly Campana and things went south from there. And now she's not back. So they'll have to readjust. And it's really going to be a great temperature check for the division at this tournament. And you love to see that for the first tournament of the year.
All right, let's take a look at the men's side. You've got UBC, BYU, Cal Poly, Cal, Case Western, Grand Canyon, Northwestern, Oregon, Stanford, UCLA, UCSB, UC Santa Cruz, UCSD, USC, Utah, Utah State, Victoria, Washington, Western Washington, and then Arizona State getting in with a qualifier. Big note here, Keith. Oregon coming to SBI. I believe I've never seen them at this tournament.
I think we see them at Pres Day a lot, but yeah, SBI, yes. There's not their usual stomping grounds, and there's some Oregon preseason hype this year. They got some good recruits. They had some good returners, so this will be a good chance to see what they are made of. But we also have some really strong teams that we expect to be really strong. BYU, SLO, Washington in the field. Not as much travel here. Northwestern really the only big visitor. You have a couple of teams from various regions between the Southwest and the Northwest, but not as much connectivity being provided by these teams.
All three of the Utah programs of note. Mm-hmm. That'll be interesting. And of course, how does Washington look? How does Oregon look? Cal Poly, like you got a lot of the heavy hitters from the West Coast. Pretty much everybody except except Colorado. So should be good. I mean, this is about as competitive an SBI field as we've seen ever in both divisions.
Definitely, especially when you add the two divisions together. And before I forget, and I get a message about it. Sorry, I skipped Case Western on the men's side. They also were a team that's going to provide some connectivity. Sorry about that. But yeah, these are pretty strong fields. They're going to start to give us a sense of what two different regions look like between the Southwest and Northwest. Plus, we'll get a little look at some other teams, and we've seen the like second tier, third tier teams from those regions have success. We've seen teams that you might not expect go on to be strong teams during the year, whether it's UCLA or one of the Utah teams, like you mentioned, or one of the UC schools on the men's side that people aren't talking about, like Santa Barbara or Santa Cruz. These are teams that could end up on the national slate. Like they could end up with bids. Like we don't overlook these teams, and it's these kind of results from these tournaments where they go out and get wins early on in the year that can help power that.
More college talk to come as we head into next week. And our show will be all college all day next week as we get you ready for the 2023 season. Keith, you want to make a prediction who's winning Carolina kickoff in the women's division this weekend?
Ooh, what's I'm gonna.
I know it's a
Coastal
struggle.
Carolina, maybe this is their. No, I think I'm gonna go with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I haven't heard of them. I know people aren't talking a lot about Chapel Hill, but I just got a good feeling about them. I think that there's some talent there.
We'll see what they can show us. Let's take a look here. I think the schedule is up. It sure is. UNC leads the way, of course, is the 1 seed. NC State App State, Temple, Duke, South Carolina, UNCB, and the Triangle Tourists. Look out, Keith. How many points will the Triangle Tourists score on UNC?
3 or 4. I don't know. This was kind of a down year for Triangle Youth, right? Like we didn't quite see the blowout from them that we usually see in 2022. So I don't know. I might not be as optimistic as usual for Triangle, but who knows? They could easily show up and end up being in the final. The teams I'm curious about those other AC teams behind UNC. Could they be in the bid conversation? App State had some hot moments last year. What are they going to look like this year? Following that off, NC State, also some hype around them. So I'm curious what those teams are going to look like, even more than Triangle Tours.
Charis Berry on the roster for App State. So we will get a good look at the early AC pecking order at kickoff. Okay. Before we get to semi-pro stuff, 2 more notes. 1, the U.S. mixed beach national team that will be competing at the Beach World Championships coming up in October, right after Club Nationals in Huntington Beach, which is where Layout took place this weekend. So Layout and LA Throwback, popular beach tournaments. Weather was not super cooperative this year, unfortunately, but it seems like people still had a nice time. But the U.S. mixed beach national team was competing. And Keith, the rumors are that we know they lost, and apparently they lost pretty bad to a DC area team that featured Claire Trope, Christian Boxley, among others. Should we be concerned about the mixed beach national team?
Oof. I'm not ready to be concerned. I mean, I don't think it's that weird for these teams to lose in the preseason to like club teams, so to speak. That stuff doesn't stress me out. I mean, hey, we've seen the U.S. Look at the World Games team; they could lose in tournament and still turn around and bounce back and win a gold medal.
And recall, they lost at Poultry Days,
right? So then it's not the first time that we've seen a U.S. national team lose at these types of tournaments. So no, it doesn't stress me out, but it is interesting to look at, and a great feather in the cap for the DC folks, especially if anybody on the team tried out for the beach team and didn't make it.
Well, interesting note. DC looking strong. We'll talk a little bit about some DC in the AUDL in just a moment. Last thing before we talk semi-pro. Ben Feng, who was until recently the college director at USA Ultimate, announced on Twitter that he has left his job at USA Ultimate. He said in a Twitter thread, quote, "I've had struggles with major depression for a couple months. It has impacted simple tasks, motivation, and communication. I've been searching for changes, gone to therapy to try to help gain a different perspective. One activity that might be reflective is hiking. Over the next 5 to 6 months, I'm hoping to hike constantly, including an attempted through hike of the Appalachian Trail. I thought about not tweeting this thread, but I felt it was more important to be open about mental health and the potential stigmas associated with it. If you're personally struggling with depression or mental health, know that you're not alone and feel free to reach out at any time." Obviously, wishing the best to Ben. Had a chance to see him at Club Nationals not too long ago. And it's sorry to hear that he's struggling a little bit, but I know that he's going to come through on the other side. So just thinking about you, Ben.
Definitely sending best wishes to Ben. And I know I appreciate that there are still folks trying to destigmatize challenges around mental health. Many of us, including myself, have gone through those kinds of challenges. And it's always helpful to know that there are other people going through the same thing, because it can be so isolating to face those kinds of challenges by yourself. And, certainly hoping that Ben's experience is good and that USA Ultimate also has a smooth transition into whoever will be next in the role. I know staffing can be a challenge for USA Ultimate, and finding people who really are able to have the time and the energy to commit to this thing it can be difficult. But hopefully there's somebody who's a great candidate who's just lining up in the right space to get in there.
Obviously, it's a tough time to have to restaff for your college director position. it's just been a lot of turnover for USAU in general over the last couple of years. At the moment, they just don't have a listed person for the college division. So presumably we'll be hiring or are already hiring, and we'll keep an eye on that as well. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, PUL, WL, AUDL talk coming your way. Welcome back to Deep Look. Time to talk about some of the news coming out of the semi-pro leagues. We'll go in alphabetical order. That gets us started with the American Ultimate Disc League. We got some new signings to talk about. And I think we have to begin, Keith, with Pavel Giannis, who has been the talisman for the Chicago Union for years. Well, he moved to take a job out in Los Angeles, Keith, and he just signed a 6-year deal with the Los Angeles Aviators. So it's the longest contract in AUDL history, and he will try to take his center handler winning ways with him over to Los Angeles, team that finished towards the bottom of the Western Division last year. 4-8 they went, finishing 5th in the division. How big a deal is this, Keith?
Well, if according to the AUDL, it's the most important roster move that's ever happened in the history of any sport, as far as I can tell. I mean, the hype is off the charts, but I get it. I mean, Giannis has been the Giannis Chicago connection is like one of the pillars of the league. I think it's one of the well, you just think of Pavel Giannis when you think of Chicago Union. Like his like you said, he's the talisman of the team and has been for a long time. Has had a ton of success at the AUDL level, and maybe it's not such a bad thing to have a change of environment, especially to a team that doesn't exactly have a clear winning identity, because you can kind of build it around him. And I think that's been where he's thrived the most, is when he's like an offensive centerpiece. When he can kind of have his way with the offense. That's the best environment perhaps for him. So I'm sure it'll be interesting to see what it looks like on both ends, both what Chicago looks like without him. He's been such a core part of their identity for years, and what LA looks like adding him to the roster in a West where, it's never felt like any team is like that much worse than the best teams. Like, you get a lot of weird competitive matchups, and 4-8. If you went down to, if you had some other measure other than just wins and losses, if you look at what following the NBA and stuff, they'll do point differential based on other advanced metrics, and then how that compares to the team's actual record to say how lucky teams were.
The Pythagorean.
Right. If you were doing stuff like that, I think you would probably find LA is probably under what their actual record should be, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, you think about what Pavel brings to the team. First of all, leads the league all time in assists and completions. Nearly 400 career assists and coming up on 4,000 completions. He's just been the center handler of note in the league for a couple of years now. And Chicago has gotten better around him. I think you look at the way that the Union have progressed. They weren't making the playoffs. They were losing to Madison. Then they started winning, getting to the playoffs. Then they'd lose in the Central Divisional Final. And then finally they get to championship weekend and they make the final. And yes, they got their doors blown off by New York this year, but Pavel has been really good. He does have that one just turnover seared in my brain when they lost to Raleigh last year, or in 21, that is, where he had that just under and he just missed through it. And it was one of his only mistakes of the game. But mostly this is somebody who can show up in LA and run their offense. And it was not a particularly good offense last year. They had a decent defense, but he should help them. They should get better. Whether that's going to be enough for them to get past the Colorados, the Salt Lakes, the San Diegos, I don't know. But they're definitely going to have a chance to get into the playoffs with him. I mean, I think he actually is maybe worth enough for them to get into the playoffs. Is that crazy to say?
I don't necessarily think it is. And I also think that this kind of signing can be attractive to other potential players. It can make players a little more interested in playing with LA. And I don't know what to make of it being 6 years. I've gone on the record as saying, like, I don't really get what the length of these contracts actually means. Like, what's to prevent him from exiting the contract? But it's also like, it's kind of a long commitment to say, I'm going to play with this team for 6 years. Like, a lot of people in Pavel's age can't really say with confidence where they'll be 6 years from now. So it's definitely a big commitment.
Well, we'll see what happens with that, but gets the very long contract. Over in DC, Andrew Roy and Cole Jurek signing on with the DC Breeze. Not a big surprise considering that the two have been in the city and played for Truck Stop this past season, but big gets for the Breeze. I mean, they are continuing to get younger and better, and I think we'll probably see some of their older veterans who maybe were not the ideal pieces for them last year phase off this team, and you're looking at an offensive line that was already excellent, getting even better, Keith. And there's a reason to be excited about this Breeze team. The question, of course, is can they get past New York? This is going to make it more possible for them to do that, and they certainly came close in 22.
And look, keeping the cohesion together from that Truck Stop offense and being able to port that into the UDL is super valuable. Like, there's just no way around it. I mean, this was a great unit at the club level. The DC offense has been good for a number of years at the ADL level as well. And being able to add two players who are certainly going to be able to bolster the team in that regard is very helpful, as well as keeping that chemistry that benefits both sides of the equation. I mean, it means that those players get to play more together, both for the AUDL team and for the club team. So there's a lot to be gained, and great signings, two really good players, and you got to be excited about the Breeze right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, Andrew Roy in particular has a lot of experience playing in the AUDL at a high level, playing for Minnesota, and the Minnesota to DC pipeline right now.
I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm sure Minnesota doesn't love it.
And then let's see the other big news. Houston has signed a couple players. The Havoc, I believe that name is new since we've talked about this team last, Keith. Houston Havoc, they got a logo. It's kind of like a tornado looking logo.
Yeah, made out of the V in the word Havoc, I think.
Yeah. They sign Matt Bennett and Ben Lewis, who have played both in Austin and Dallas, played in college together at A&M, and have been a great duo, to be honest, for a long time. So, no surprise to see them sign on. We were expecting to see Matt Bennett in particular be kind of one of the first signings for this Houston team. And I don't know, what to expect from Houston, really. I still think it's going to be a challenge for them to win games in this division, but these are the sort of players that you need to start with.
They also, I believe they just announced just today, Xavier Fuzat and Aaron Barcio, two of the young talents from the University of Texas Tough, will also be on that roster. So a couple of players from around Texas, not even just the same area. As far as Bennett and Lewis, I mean, I think Lewis might actually be the more valuable player to add. I know Bennett's the flashy name, a player who people have fond memories of, but I think Ben Lewis is probably a higher impact player overall and a nice get for them. I think it'll be interesting to see who they pull from the other rosters. That's a big part of what's going to matter here, because we haven't seen enough from the elite men's scene in Houston to think that they're going to be able to power a really strong semi-pro team just based on that. So seeing where they pull from is going to be a big part of getting an estimate for this team.
Yeah, and they're already missing out on some of those key Austin guys. Austin Soul have already announced re-signings for Kyle Henke, Evan Swiatek, Eric Brodbeck, Jake Raddick, others, and lots of teams sort of announcing the kinds of re-signings you would expect. So Colorado is getting its core back together. Alex Atkins, Quinn Feiner, Cody Spicer, Jay Frood, Nethercutt is back, Joe Smash, and similar kind of results from around the league so far. Not a lot of other big surprises to this point. And so,
I think Andrew Sjogren's gone from Detroit.
Oh, that's right.
I guess you could call that a surprise. I mean, he played with Machine during the club season, so it's not like a huge shocker, but definitely a loss for a player who's been like one of the key offensive pieces, perhaps the best player in Mechanics history. He's
been the only guy for them, to be honest. Like, it's getting uglier in Detroit. So yeah, I think that's the look around the league right now in the AUDL, and still kind of waiting to see what we get from the Empire this year. How strong is this LA roster going to end up being with Pavel now signed on? Lots to look for. Next up, Premier Ultimate League. Big news so far, Philly Surge joining the league this year, of course, and they're starting to announce some of their signings for 2023. Few notable names already, Keith. Linda Morse, Liz Hart, Raha Mosafari, all announced as playing for this Philly team. Of course, not surprising. They all live in the area, but looks like this Surge team is going to be picking up the good players, and it's making other rosters a little weaker, Keith.
Yeah, pulling players from other teams, as we expected, and getting some of the core, particularly AMP names around the roster, with all three of those players being top players for AMP this past year. They also got Rachel Alfano, Emma Soils. So there are some players popping out in Philly, and these are kind of the top line names you would expect to get. Like, we would be concerned if we weren't seeing these players set up with this roster. So this is the starting point for them. And could they pull more talent from these other teams? It's definitely possible. Could they pull from further away? Could they pull people like from Pittsburgh, who, we've seen some Pittsburgh people play with Columbus in the past? Like, could they pull people across the state? Like, I'm not sure. So be curious to see what their sphere of influence looks like.
Other teams still kind of in the tryout department at this point. Not a lot of announced signings.
Or try-ins.
Yes, that's right. We have seen that. So PUL kind of still TBD in terms of who is where, but I remain very interested to see if any of the Colombian players decide to still play in the league and where they'll end up. And do we see any power shifts?
Yeah, getting a sense of what New York, DC, Philly looks like. I mean, it's to me one of the biggest stories. And then, yeah, if we see where those Colombian players land, or players who have previously played like with Revo, who are traveling out to do so in the U.S. I don't necessarily expect a lot of that to happen, but those are players who've shown an openness to playing in the league. So could they reappear elsewhere? Could they be courted by another program?
Over in the Western Ultimate League, big announcements over the last week. Dina Elamelek and Penny Wu both signing with the San Diego Super Bloom. So Elamelek leaving the Astra and strengthening the Super Bloom. And then Penny Wu, who, as far as I know, doesn't live in San Diego, is going to be a big pickup going from the PUL to the Western Ultimate League. And going to be exciting to see what she's able to bring to the table. Big thrower. I think we could. It's not hard to imagine those two playing together on the O line.
Not at all. And being productive. I mean, but Wu's also a pretty strong defender. I mean, these are players you could play both ways and be really impactful. I mean, Dina Elamelek was one of the best players in the league last year. I'm looking at our edge statistics for the Western Ultimate League last year, and she was 7th in the league in total edge, behind basically like your MVP candidates for the most part. So really, really big get. They already announced that, like Kayla Helton and Krista Bajunas, who were two of the stars of the team last year, are back. So San Diego forming a pretty formidable group to start the year as they've gotten into these roster announcements, and Elamelek and Wu are some really strong reinforcements.
Yeah, I mean, obviously saw like the coalescing of the flip side team, the club season. San Diego kind of a hot spot right now for women's ultimate. And can they put enough pieces together to challenge Seattle? That's going to be the big question. And we will, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
There was a cryptic Discord post that said that Seattle has some big announcements on the way. So we'll see if that comes to pass. I know nothing more than that.
Okay, well, that is your catch up from around the leagues. And we, of course, will have more to talk about as we get closer to the start of those. The Western Ultimate League begins first in March. They have the luxury of having teams in Southern California and Arizona where they can get games started in March. The AUDL and the PUL will be starting in April. So stay tuned for more. We're waiting schedules from all of the leagues, and we'll get you started. And, of course, you can listen to our other podcast, Double Overtime, covering the Western Ultimate League and PUL, hosted by Jenna Weiner and Sasha Vogel, as well as Stall 7, our AUDL podcast. And I want to put it out there right now, if you're listening to this, we are looking for a new host for Stall 7. I believe that Alex Rubin is going to be stepping away this year for work reasons. So we are looking for a new Stall 7 host. If you're interested in covering the AUDL and talking about it on the podcast, get in touch with us. Email editor@ultiworld.com and let us know more. And excited to get that podcast up and running again for the 2023 season. That is going to do it for this week's edition of Deep Look. For Keith, I'm Charlie saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week. Don't miss our subscriber bonus segment where we talk about the 3 things we're most looking forward to in the upcoming college season.